I've always been interested in what's happening in the underground. At age 19, I made my way to this research island in Panama, and all the scientists were studying the tropical ecosystems that they could see, the plants, the animals above ground. But I was interested in the life that was generating all that diversity and what was happening below ground. And after that, I never looked up again.
That is an excerpt from an interview with 2025 MacArthur Fellow Toby Kiers, an evolutionary biologist whose research is revealing the hidden world beneath our feet. Toby studies the complex trade networks that form between plants and their underground fungal partners. She illuminates the evolutionary mechanisms underlying cooperation between species, as well as the role of plant microbe mutualism and ecosystem health. In this episode, we go in depth with Toby to learn more about her work, and her exceptional creativity. Let's hear more from her interview.
Life on Earth really depends on microbes, especially fungi and bacteria. And I've spent my career studying the interactions between plants and their underground microbial partners, specifically trying to understand the trade dynamics between different species, how and when and why they trade, and what causes that trade partnership to break down. Plants and fungi form these underground markets where plants provide carbon down to the fungal network, and in exchange, fungi are foraging for phosphorus and nitrogen that they provide to the plant. What we've learned is that both partners can discriminate and sort of choose which partner they'd rather interact with. And because of that choice, these very interesting market-like dynamics emerge, with both partners trying to get the most from the interaction. During my PhD, I was very interested in understanding cheating and deception and punishment in nature. Because organisms, when they trade, they always have this ability to withhold a bit of resources, maybe not give as much as they could, and they can save energy by doing this. They can almost free ride the interaction. So why don't all these partnerships in nature break down if there's this ability of organisms to cheat? And so we tried to set up a very clever experiment where we wanted to force one of the partners to cheat and see if the plant could tell it was being cheated. And so to do that, we worked with a plant, a soybean plant, that makes a partnership with a bacteria called rhizobia. And the rhizobia are taking nitrogen out of the atmosphere and giving it to the plant. But what we did was we put these rhizobia underground in these little chambers, and we had them enclosed in a totally different atmosphere. And we forced them to cheat because the atmosphere was no longer nitrogen. They couldn't make nitrogen out of the atmosphere. And then we just stood back and watched to see what the plants would do. And we were shocked to find that the plants could detect at such a small level that they were being cheated, that they were giving sugar still to the bacteria, but they weren't getting nitrogen in return. And so what they did, the plants suffocated those bacteria and reduced the reproduction of those ones that were cheating. So it looks like plants are very good at detecting whether their partners are good and bad. The plant is able to optimize its nutrient uptake. But I think the most exciting thing was asking the flip question and actually looking at it from a fungal perspective and saying, can fungi detect a good plant versus a bad plant? Let's say a plant that's growing in the sun versus a plant that's growing in the shade. And so we developed new ways to actually track resources inside fungal networks to see how they were moving resources between different plant partners. And we found that the fungi have evolved incredible strategies to detect if a plant is good or bad. So for example, they will move nutrients actively to a place where demand is higher and actually get more carbon for those nutrients by actively moving it there. They can create monopolies so that they have total control over the plant system. They can even take up the nutrients and hoard them in their network until the plant is forced to pay a higher price. So these are all strategies that have evolved over hundreds of millions of years that allow fungi to move nutrients in a way that really benefits their reproduction. And I'm betting that they've evolved strategies that we've never seen before in our own economic systems. And so together with collaborators at the Biophysics Institute, AMOF, in Amsterdam, we created a robot, an imaging robot that actually allows us to track the fungi as they navigate space. And so you've got this robot that is taking these tiled images of the network as it grows, and then we stitch these images together and we can follow experiments that have about 500 million nodes of interactions. So then we use machine learning to try to understand the structure of the fungi. You can think of the network as like a highway that's being built to go out and forage and collect the phosphorus and nitrogen. But we've also developed a way to zoom into those highways and study the nutrient flows within them, and even tag the carbon with fluorescent tags that allows us to follow in real time the carbon moving through the network. What has surprised me the most is the way that fungi are able to sense their environment in such precise ways. When you think about a network, it's got billions of growing tips in soil, and soils are the most complex habitats on Earth. And somehow it's able to pick up information and process that information throughout the network. How does it process information with no central nervous system? I mean, humans have brains, and so we think of them as these massive heads that can make decisions. But what we're seeing in fungal networks is that they're able to make decisions, but using their bodies, there's just so much to discover in how they move resources in a way that is both effective and incredibly efficient. We see the importance of fungi across so many different ecosystems. In agriculture, these fungi are incredibly important at providing nutrients to crops, to protecting them from diseases, even to helping crops have bigger, sweeter flowers. In forests, these fungi, they form these scaffoldings, these very sticky, thin scaffolding that hold the soil together to prevent erosion. In restoration, we need these fungi to be introduced with native plants so that you can rewild ecosystems and really get a sense of what's happening both above ground and below ground. Even in desert ecosystems, these fungi help plants access water in some of the most extreme habitats on Earth. These fungi, they also offer like a library of solutions to future climate change issues. You can almost think of them as one of Earth's underground circulatory systems. Fungi bring carbon down into soil systems because plants process about 13 billion tons of CO2 that they then feed to fungal networks. So that's equivalent to roughly 1/3 of all emissions from fossil fuels. So really, life as we know it wouldn't exist without these fungi. So SPUN stands for the Society for the Protection of Underground Networks, and I co-founded SPUN in 2021 out of sheer frustration because the data on fungal systems that we were producing was not being seen by decision makers. It was not being included in conservation and climate agendas. And so SPUN's mission is to map the Earth's fungal networks and advocate for their protection. So we work with local scientists, local collaborators all over the world and build this decentralized network to start mapping the biodiversity of these fungal communities across the entire Earth in some of the most remote, hard to access ecosystems. If these networks disappear, we don't understand what's going to happen. We're worried about collapse of ecosystems above ground. There are so many solutions underground, but we just haven't spent the time or the resources or the energy discovering what those are. Microbes lie at the base of life on Earth. The water we drink, the crops we eat, the air we breathe, it's all because of interactions with microbes. And so to take a step back and understand those interactions, to understand the flows of resources that are moving between organisms on Earth, is what we need to do right now. This is becoming urgent because we don't understand this invisible life. But now we have tools. We have tools in the laboratory that allow us to follow these interactions at a very precise and small scale. But we also have tools at the global scale to start sequencing these communities, understand what DNA is where, who is doing what, and build the first interactive maps of these communities underground. So the most important thing now is bringing those worlds together and making people start caring about what they can't see.
Toby Kiers is currently University Research Chair and a professor in the Department of Ecology and Evolution at Vrije Universiteit in Amsterdam, Netherlands. She is also a co-founder and executive director of SPUN, the Society for the Protection of Underground Networks. You can learn more at spun.earth. The MacArthur Fellows Program identifies and supports extraordinarily creative individuals with a track record of excellence who demonstrate the ability to impact society in significant and beneficial ways through their pioneering work. To learn more, visit us at macfound.org.